You're listening to Retro Reels, a show that looks back on films from time gone by and recalls the various events, trends, and perspectives that inform their creation. I'm your host, Hannah Walensky, here to guide you through a trip to the past via the silver screen. I had quite a bit of trouble coming up with a film that I thought would be appropriate for the episode just ahead of Father's Day this Sunday. There are plenty of movies about fathers and their children, and while I would have preferred to pick one about a father and his daughter, for obvious reasons, I technically already talked about some of the best father-daughter films when I watched the works of Yasujiro Ozu 2 Octobers ago. Late spring and autumn afternoon, if I hadn't already covered them, they would be the perfect movies to revisit for a fatherhood-themed month, but since I have covered them already, I had to get a bit more creative, coming up with movies for July. The film that came to mind was Bicycle Thieves, one of, if not the most significant work to come out of a short-lived but very important film movement called Italian neorealism. Director Vittorio De Sica, alongside other major figures of the movement, Roberto Rossellini and Luchino Visconti, emerged from the pressure cooker that was living under fascism, and over the course of about 10 years, they produced a short run of movies that include a few of the most impactful ones of all time. Neorealism arose directly as a reaction against Benito Mussolini's regime, which had imposed strict censorship on the film industry. They weren't necessarily putting out propaganda like Chinese cinema did for so long, because that was what journalism was for. Instead of making movies, they produced newsreels that glorified the regime. This freed up the feature film industry to be relatively conventional, and in fact, they referenced ideology fairly minimally. But they were very careful to present an idealized, nationalistic, and dignified Italy, a bit of overly optimistic, escapist fantasy. And actually, that's what audiences wanted. That's what they responded to, because by that point in time, things were not looking so good on the ground. In 1943, Italy had begun to negotiate their surrender to the Allies. Mussolini was shipped off to Germany, and things were chaotic, to say the least. It would be another 2 years before Allied forces would liberate the entire peninsula, and Mussolini would be dragged out from his hidey hole in Germany and then strung up by the ankles and disrespected. Well-deserved, but of course, like I said, amid all that excitement, real people were suffering. Bicycle Thieves vividly documents a downtrodden Rome, hollowed out from years of war. A lot of industrial and agricultural infrastructure had been destroyed, the lira had collapsed, and unemployment or underemployment was the norm. The country was very much in a transitional period, and by 1948, the year of the film's release, Italians were voting in their first general election since 1922, when Mussolini first took over, and elections went out the window for a bit. By the time the Christian Democrats consolidated power, they also wanted to abolish depictions of Italians living poor, socially unjust lives from the national film industry, and that included these neorealist movies. For similar political reasons as the fascist regime, actually. So the movement was only around for just long enough to capture a nation in disarray and slowly rebuilding, the real conditions of the poor and lower working class struggling just to get by. The new government, not unlike the old, thought that was bad for Italy's image, for morale in general, and so by 1952, when they got a real foothold and had censored everything they wanted to censor, Italian neorealism had basically come and gone. The legacy it left behind, though, fundamentally changed movie-making as we know it. There were no studios, no sets, no stars involved in the making of Bicycle Thieves. Literally, there were no studios, because all that stuff had been blown to smithereens. De Sica shot almost exclusively on the streets of Rome using non-professional actors. His leading man, Lamberto Maggiorani, was a factory worker. These directors were the first to make on-location shooting a defining characteristic of their films, a part of its meaning. It wasn't just necessary, they had no other options, nowhere else to shoot after all. It was also the crux of the stories they told. Bicycle Thieves is based on a 1946 novel by Luigi Bartolini and tells the story of Antonio Ricci, a man who, like so many other men in post-war Italy, was desperate for work. He is offered a job posting advertisements, but it requires a bicycle, which he had just pawned a few days before. To get his bike back, his wife, Maria, strips their bed of her dowry bedsheets, which back then was just about the only thing of value a poor family like theirs had. But it's not long before a thief makes off with Antonio's bicycle. Filing a police report is no help, and attempting to track the bike down at a marketplace doesn't come to anything either. Eventually, Antonio, accompanied by his son Bruno, spots someone who appears to be the thief and they pursue him. The thief leads him into a brothel. There's a kerfuffle in the streets. Upon being publicly accused, the thief falls to the ground and has a fit, and whether that's real or fake, it suddenly makes Antonio look like the bad guy, even though he is in fact the victim. Police search the guy's place. Still no bike. Antonio has no case and nobody to back him up. Father and son pass the football stadium on their way home, where he is taunted by a seemingly endless array of bicycles, none of them his. There, Antonio spots one unattended, near a doorway. After much anguished deliberation, he tells Bruno to head home on the tram first, and hops on the bike in an attempt to steal it. But bystanders immediately call attention to the crime, and he is chased, surrounded, and pulled off the bicycle. Bruno, having missed the tram, is stunned to bear witness to this scene. But just as Antonio is being taken away by police, the bicycle's owner sees the look on poor Bruno's face and tells them to forget about it and release his father. It's a simple story, the drama of the everyday event, delivered such that it can almost be too much. Watching it reminded me of how I feel when I watch a high-stakes figure skating event and the skater falls down. How close they come to something greater, just to lose it all in a single moment. It's almost too much to bear. Watching Bicycle Thieves is like having to watch this moment, the moment that a dream is crushed, for about 60 minutes, after that first 20 or so minutes of setup before the bike is stolen, which basically serves to establish just how much is at stake for this poor little family. The rest of the film is Antonio's pursuit of something he can never recover, the abject uselessness of the police, the indifference, the hostility, and even the complicity of the public. Italian neorealism's DNA can be found in several major subsequent film movements, probably most notably in French New Wave, which took it in a much more ironic and tongue-in-cheek direction, but it was specifically impactful in nations where there might not necessarily have been the budget or the infrastructure to support big productions. In India, for example, director Satyajit Ray, who along with a few of his contemporaries pioneered the whole so-called parallel cinema as an alternative to Bollywood, drew directly from this film when creating his Apu trilogy. Brazilian and Iranian filmmakers also drew heavily from it. The movement showed filmmakers the world over that they could just go outside and they could commit to film real societal problems right on the streets where they actually take place. Italian neorealism proved that you could still make great movies with great meaning, relatively inexpensively, using your country's landscape and its people. Of course, for all the impact this movement had on subsequent filmmaking traditions, it is also itself an amalgamation of the cinema before it, particularly Charlie Chaplin, who keeps coming up on the program this month, and whose 1921 film The Kid also happens to feature a down-on-their-luck father and son duo trying to get by in the uncaring city. Had Bicycle Thieves simply taken a different tone, hadn't gone the way of the drama, the emotionally devastating, there are sequences that could have just as easily been made slapstick with just a little tweak here and there. The final scene is the most deliberate nod to Chaplin, Antonio and Bruno, hand in hand, walking together, away from the camera, absorbed into the madding crowd. It could have been cute and sentimental, right? Like the end of The Kid, when the titular kid embraces the tramp that he has come to see as his father. Instead, it's gut-wrenching, seeing Antonio begin to weep, Bruno reach out to console him, knowing that they have soundly lost and are walking into a grim, uncertain future. Just like watching that figure skater fall on the ice, it's hard to watch without wanting to look away to save yourself the pain. Writ large, Bicycle Thieves is less a movie about fatherhood and more a movie about a man who needs a job. But the father-son duo in the film is such an evocative and memorable part of it that the image of them together, the image of little Bruno's face especially, wise and burdened beyond its years, it endures in your mind. Little Bruno, who comports himself in every way like a tiny adult, how he admonishes his father about the shysters at the pawn shop, combs his hair in the mirror, checks on his baby sister, goes to work at a gas station as an attendant. He is every bit another man of the household, a byproduct of being born just in time to live in hard times. And besides, what is a father if not that guy who goes to work? What is a man without a job? I use the word man in the mankind sense. The argument to be made today is a lot less gender essentialist, of course. Women can and do work and maintain successful careers too and feel fulfilled by them. I know I start to feel crazy when I'm out of a job for too long, and even after having a baby, I was unwilling to give up working, even though that means effectively exchanging my salary for childcare. I'm not made to be a stay-at-home mom. I'm a better, more engaged parent if I keep some shreds of my own life intact. But frankly, this is also no longer the kind of world where most families can get by on a single salary. My employment feels non-negotiable, not just for my sanity, but for our family's bottom line. So just like that, the movie's message feels suddenly relevant again, as the advent of artificial intelligence either directly decimates certain skill sets and jobs or gets leveraged as a convenient excuse for mass layoffs. Having not yet graduated high school when the '08 recession occurred, I can say pretty definitively that this is the worst job market I've lived through in my entire working life. It's more than an unemployment problem, it's an underemployment problem. It's an unreliable employment problem. It's a terrible soul-sucking employment problem. Antonio technically was able to get a job, but the fact that just one stolen bicycle could upend the entire arrangement, the absence of any buffer, any actual job security, it all feels very similar to our current predicament. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you have economic security. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you are particularly gainfully employed, that you have upward mobility. Just because you have a job doesn't mean they aren't trying to figure out how to replace you with a robot or with underpaid overseas labor at the first opportunity. Maybe that's why seeing Antonio's struggles feels that much more poignant to me at this moment in time, when it increasingly feels like there are just not very many good jobs left, like there are no good places left to work, like there's not many ways left to make honest money. The only way you seem to see people getting rich these days is by running a scam, grifting people, stealing the proverbial bicycle, as it were. My final thoughts on Bicycle Thieves ended up being more about the ongoing labor crisis than about fatherhood, but I can say one thing to that point. If there was anything my father successfully provided, which it wasn't the only thing, but the most important thing, was a sense of security. In many ways, he also provided the voice you're listening to. After 2 years on the job, I've long gotten used to listening to myself recorded, playing it back, editing the footage, but every now and then, I'm still more than a little bit shocked to hear coming through my headphones someone who sounds in every way, from word choice to delivery to comedic timing, like a female version of my father. That's all I have for you guys today. I'm Hannah Belinsky. Thank you for tuning in to Retro Reels, and I hope you'll join me again next time on another look back on the way things were.